Okay, so good evening, everyone. I just wanted to thank you guys all for coming out tonight. This symposium kind of began because I noticed that there was a lack of a platform where students could talk about interdisciplinary topics, so I wanted to create this conference so students could have that opportunity. And without further ado, let's just go ahead and begin, and we have an introduction video.
You know, there's the term in our business when it comes to memory. One type of memory is called flashbulb memory. And flashbulb memory is a memory where there's an emotion attached to it.
Number 80, Aquarius Crane on the return.
I often talk about that game. It's a game that you just can't forget.
Q was having a game of his life. It seemed like he was catching everything. He was a receiver.
We were down, it was fourth, and the ball was constantly going towards me.
Probably happened 15 feet in front of me. I was standing on the sideline.
I just did a couple yards, dashed, caught the ball. I was so determined just to score that I wasn't allowing myself to be stopped.
Q was trying to stretch out, you know, to get a first down. It was just one of those things, you know, it was a clean hit, but it was just one of those hits that changed Q's life.
For a moment, it was silent.
It's tough to remember that. Q was at least unconscious. Then, you know, it was clear it was probably more than that.
And Coach Small, you know, he come towards me and he just tells me, keep your eyes open, whatever you do.
Rescue squad, you know, rushed him over to the hospital.
That night, that was the night everything changed. At a young age, I was so troubled, sleeping in cars, abandoned homes, going days without food. I was lashing out, making it hard on my grandmother because she did it all by herself. See, I didn't have many male figures in my life. The ones that I did have, they were in prison. Coach Henderson, he wasn't just even a counselor. He wanted to be involved. And I could see that.
The first word was that Q would be paralyzed from his neck down. Many times Coach Small and I would get in the car and, you know, go see Q. I can remember one night, just out of the blue, Q says, "Hey, Coach, I want you to know I'm gonna graduate from high school." I was like, "Great, Q, I'm all about it, man." And he says, "No, you don't understand. Not only am I gonna graduate, but I'm gonna graduate on time." I'm thinking to myself, how are you gonna do that, man? You've been out of school now, you can't hold a pencil.
Everyone thought that would be too much to carry. Coach Anderson believed, though.
Q, it's possible. But man, I'm telling you, it's gonna be a long race, and it's gonna mean you're gonna have to get after it, big time.
All I need is a chance. I can do the rest. Just put me in a position.
All right, how can he pull this off? How can he get this? We set up this thing where somebody came to his house daily.
Saturday and Sunday, I didn't have a free day. along with therapy. And it was hard. But I grabbed that diploma.
To watch him graduate on time with his class, really, really special. Q had every reason in the world to tap out, to say, I'm not doing it. And that's what's so amazing about this kid.
Playing football, it was something that I loved to do, but that wasn't it. I wanted to get through school. I tell myself, you're halfway there. Just keep moving.
For our safety, because it's a scientific fact, thugs do not have any aim. You've never seen a thug at a gun range. But I hated it, and I thought my mom was over-exaggerating. And the reason I hated it so much was because my aunt had gangster roaches. And I'm not talking about your normal little bugs. I'm talking about flat-out big gangster roaches. They had bandanas, knives, guns. They wish you would spray them with Raid. They're daring you to spray them with some Raid. And you know how you got your typical bugs when you cut the light on, they scatter. You cut the lights on these roaches, you're gonna catch them sipping on a 40-ounce, shooting dice. I lost all my lunch money messing with these roaches. So I really thought that my mom was over-exaggerating up until the night where I can recall a pistol going off outside my window. And a young man is screaming as his life is slipping through his fingers. And I can remember my mom rushing out there to his aid, covered in his blood. And I asked myself, this is what it's gonna be like. And my mom said, that's it. And she sent me over to my grandma's crib. Now see, I had no problem being with grandma because I love grandma to death. She the type that'll pray for you and cuss you out at the same time. I ain't lying. But I love her, and see, the thing about her was she was always willing and giving. And that's one of the traits that I always hoped that I would have attained. And I can remember in the bedroom, I'm chilling with my siblings, all 5 of us. Count it out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just like those steps. And we watching 106 in Park, and I don't even know if any of y'all can remember that, but it was the BET talk show music videos, and my favorite video was coming on, Beyonce Crazy in Love. I mean, fellas, I know I ain't the only one that's crazy about Beyonce when she come on TV. Especially when that that's my part. But as my part is approaching, someone began banging on the front door. And I'm thinking it's just one of my friends, so I'm saying eventually they will leave because I'm not moving from the spot. They're not finna interrupt this magical moment here, this intimate moment between me and Beyonce. But then the banging continues. And my grandmother yells out, cue ball, that's what my grandma liked to call me. Who is that banging on that front door? That better not be one of your nappy-headed friends or all y'all getting lit up. Now, I don't know if you ever got a beating by your grandmother, but I mean hot buns for a good week. You sleeping with your butt up in the air. So I immediately run for the front door. And I peek to see who it is, and I'm scared and amazed at the same time. It's a white man. Now, I don't know about you guys, but in this community, white men only come around for 2 reasons. Somebody getting arrested, or to report somebody has been shot. And I didn't like neither of the 2. So I yell like, Grandma, it's a white man. She comes to the door, and before she can open, I jump in front of her. And I said, Grandma, whatever you say, I didn't do it. I've been here the entire time. I didn't do it. She said, boy, get out the way. And she opens up the door. And he says, are you Barbara Crane? And she says, yes. He said, I'm reporting the disappearance of your daughter, Marcy Crane. And he immediately, this burning, tingly sensation rushes through my body, and I feel as if I'm suffocating, and the thought of it began harder for me to breathe. Because life just got real for me at the age of 12. He just said, my mother is missing. And then immediately I felt this numb feeling. Because now everything to me in life is numb. And I didn't care what I was doing. I was running the streets. I was hanging around the wrong type of individuals. I didn't care. I didn't care. Nobody could get to me. And see, I had some positive influences in my life, but I also had some negative ones, and I was steering toward the negatives more so. But see, eventually my grandmother introduces us to a lovely church couple that took me and my brother in. And they got us into sports and other activities to get us off the street. And I can remember her sitting me down, and she says, Q, your brother looks up to you. And I couldn't believe it, especially the way my life was headed. Like, I could not believe it. Because for so long, I just felt as if I was worthless. My life was meaningless. And my family members, they was very demotivating. They told me, Q, you would be good for nothing. So eventually, that's just what I started to believe, that I would be good for nothing. So why bother trying? But when she told me that he looks up to me and that he's following in my footsteps, I retraced my footsteps, and I said, I did not want that for him. I didn't want that, so I made a decision that I would change. That I would change, and that I would show him a positive light on what a male figure should look like. Because we didn't have that in our life, but see, I knew that if I wanted to do something, that I would have to do something that was considered uncommon. Because what was common was food stamp, what was common was stealing and robbing, what was common was Section 8, and I was totally against it. So I set out and I decided to play football. Because I definitely wasn't counting on my academics. If you see my report card, you would know exactly why. So I set out and I started playing football, and it's the second game. The game that I didn't know would change my life forever. and it's fourth, down, and we're down, and I'm getting ready to run a route that I ran over and over in practice. I done this countless of times. Knew the play like the back of my hand. And as I run the play, I cut up field, catch the ball, and boom, get hit. And everything slows down for me. And as I'm going to the ground, everything feels numb, and I get this burning, tingly sensation. And as I'm laying that face down on the ground, it begins harder for me to breathe. And I knew something was wrong. But I didn't think that it was this bad. But I then began to pray, which is amazing because for so long, me and God relationship was definitely rocky. Because it seems as if the more I prayed, the less it felt as if my prayers was being answered. So I'm laying there praying. I said, God, listen, if you get me through this moment, I go to church every Sunday. I go to Bible study. I would not back talk my grandmother. Listen, you just get me through this moment, God. And my coach, he said, Q, whatever you do, don't close your eyes. But as I said, it was harder for me to breathe. And I was trying to hold on, and as I was about to close my eyes, I'm flipped over. I see why the world is panicking. I'm not, because I've been here before. I know what this feeling feels like, and I told Coach, I'll be back next week. Tell the players to stay physical. And now I'm in the hospital. I'm in and out for about 2 weeks. And I wake up to my story on the news. And on the bottom of the story, it says, Q, paralyzed, football injury. And the reporter says, may never walk again. And I'm like, paralyzed? What does that even mean, paralyzed? Walk again, and I immediately try to get up. And I couldn't move. So this terror, this fear just started to creep into my body. I was in pain, I was angry with the world, and I wish that I never prayed. I wish that I just would have closed my eyes. I wish that I would have stopped breathing at that moment. My siblings, they came and visited me. And it was all 5 of us, counted out just like those steps. And I can remember the look that my brother was giving me, as if he was waiting for my next move. And as they left, I was in the hospital room, and I was laying up, and I was sharing a room with 4 other men who couldn't control their body. So now I'm in this other crisis. And I did what anyone else would do when they're in a crisis. I did the jingle. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. But I was still in there with them 4 men. But as I was laying there, I began to retrace my steps, and I began to refocus, and I had to tell myself the truth. The truth was, Q, you will never play football again. The truth was, Q, you would be in this chair. What are you going to do about it? And even though I was afraid, I knew that early on, the best way to fight fear is to understand that you had options. See, this body may have been paralyzed, but my mind wasn't. And I realized that. So I set out and I said that I would finish school. That I would show them that you could still get to that point. I was definitely determined to show them. And see, I wanted to prove my family wrong, but see, I wanted to prove myself right even more. So I told Coach what I wanted to do, and he told me it wasn't to be easy. All I needed was to be put in that position. I could do anything else. But I made sure that I voiced what it is that I wanted to do, because one, that was that accountability. For whenever I slipped, and I tell you that I had the moments where I did not want to do any work. All I want to do is just watch TV, play video games, go hit a party. But I had to eliminate those distractions. I had to be willing to sacrifice, because my weekends wasn't for myself. If I wanted to get to that point, I would have to change some things. And I realized, Q, you can do this. You can do this. I didn't have a free day. And as you can see, I got the job done. And along the way, as people was looking at me in this chair, thinking that this was the hardest hit, what they didn't know is I've been hit harder than this. This chair was not going to define me. This chair was not going to stop me. Because you know what else I also realized? I was meant to fly. I didn't need my legs anyway. I'm a crane. Cranes are meant to fly. And see, one of the things about cranes is, and what I like about them is, they were willing to fly 500 miles in order to get a meal in a day. My question is, how many of you are willing to go the distance? People see me in this chair and they think I'm paralyzed, but so many are paralyzed themselves. Paralyzed by the mentality. Paralyzed by the fear of failing. The fear of what others think. Paralyzed by situations that they may be going through. The depression. Parents are getting divorced, whatever the case may be. We all are going to get hit. But it's not how many times you get hit. It's why you get back up. And that's one of the things I want to leave everyone with. We're all meant to fly, but are you willing to go the distance? Are you willing to reach your higher self? Are you willing to do whatever it takes to get whatever it is that you want, whatever it is that you desire? Or are you going to stay down? Cranes are meant to fly. Thank you. Stay fresh.
Very fresh.
Oh, yeah, you know it.
Can't thank you enough.
Oh, yeah. You too, man.
Okay, so I want to introduce our first youth speaker of the night, and that is Cindy, who is a junior at Brookwood High School. And she's going to present her story about immigration and her struggles with accepting her identity and her newfound appreciation for her culture. Recalling her life living in America, she presents a truly relatable and inspirational story of assimilation and finding her path in a world 10,000 miles away.
That's a tough one to beat. Man, just forget that you heard that. I don't want any comparisons. Okay. So, just a quick note, this is just like not even part of my introduction, but I think it's kind of coincidental that I'm doing a speech on culture, and today is actually the first day of the Lunar New Year. So, while my family is back home celebrating, I'm here telling you about them. Yeah, okay. So, hi, my name is Cindy, and recently I went to a conference like this one, and during one of the presentations, a guest speaker, Deborah Cox, a company executive, said, "You don't know where you're going until you know where you came from." I found this to be kind of paradoxical. Why does knowing where you came from help you to figure out where you're going? I brushed the idea off at first. However, it came up again when it was time to send in our applications to present our talks in front of you today. So, hi, my name is Cindy, and here's my story. I was born in a pretty big city called Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam. My name isn't Cindy, surprise. At least that's not my real name. I was born Tai Uyên Mi Uyên, and don't worry about the pronunciations, no one has ever pronounced it right. My mother is named Nguyen Vinh Xuân, and my father, Tai Uyên Thục. And I have an older brother who is not relevant to the story like whatsoever, but his name is Hoàng Long, which translated literally means yellow dragon. Like, that's so cool. Now you can see why I was jealous of him growing up. Okay, I moved to America when I was 2 years old, and I came here to Lawrenceville, Georgia. Exciting. I had been in the Gwinnett County District my whole adolescent life. When I first entered primary school, Gwinnett County had a majority Caucasian population of 45%. Now, whoa, I just heard the word Caucasian. Why are we bringing race into this discussion? I just wanted to bring up some context on how I gave up my culture to assimilate with my peers. Exciting, doesn't it? Okay, I was never a popular kid in school, as evident from what I just said before. I was quite an oddball, actually. In fact, I was that girl that loved playing kickball in the mud, and okay, you're gonna love this, collecting insects and just like playing with them. I know, gross. Anyways, I was not like my other classmates. They brought in peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and apple juice for lunch, and I was the kid that brought in the lunch that made you go, what is that? Okay. My classmates had the luxury of being able to be understood by their parents, not just culturally, but linguistically. Most of them did not know what it was like to have to be their parents' child, but also their personal, unpaid translators. Most of them did not get embarrassed to speak their language in front of their peers, ridiculing the way the syllables sound like, and excuse me for all the Asians out there, ching chong, like, most of them did not have to worry about whether someone would approach them and ask them questions about school because they thought you were smart. No, I cannot help you in calculus or physics because I almost failed both of them last semester. And Mom, if you're listening to this, I'm doing fine and my grades are just fine. As a kid, I wanted to be normal. I wanted to be just like everybody else. So I gave up the only thing that separated me from everybody else. And that was my culture. I stopped speaking my native language. I stopped eating foods my mom made. I even made sure that others knew when they asked me for help in school that they would fail. I wanted to be accepted for who I was, that I lost all the things that made me, me. I was just a carbon copy of every other classmate around me. This cycle went on for years until I eventually couldn't even understand when my mom was asking me for an embrace. Okay, I'm gonna lighten up the story. When I was in middle school, I met a young immigrant from Korea named Jin Young Kim. At that time, you could have called me a Koreaboo, and for reference, it's like a weeaboo, but much, much worse. I grew a fascination for her language, her culture, and her delicious food. I would skip advisements on Fridays to go to her ESOL classes in the mornings. I would come over to her house, write her letters in my, at the time, really terrible Korean, and go shopping at the mall. With her broken English, she was able to tell me about her life back home, everything she had gone through, and why she decided to move here to America. I thought language can connect two people with entirely different backgrounds and create an understanding and appreciation of cultures. Okay, well, honestly, I just made up that line, like when I was writing this. What my middle school brain was really thinking was, A, did you meet any K-pop stars? B, what does kimchi taste like? And C, how hot are Korean guys? Okay. What I had realized at that moment was that language has the potential to be such a useful tool in connecting people together and building stronger relationships. I decided from that moment forward to start learning Vietnamese on my own. Do not let Rosetta Stone fool you. Learning a language is much more than knowing how to say apple, or penguin, or mom, I'll do it later. Learning a language is understanding the intricacies of the syntax, circumlocution, because you are going to forget that one word and it's going to be on the tip of your tongue and it's going to drive you insane, and learning the convoluted idiomatic expressions that belong to that language. Sorry, I'm such a nerd. I started off by forcing my mom to sit down with me every single day to read a paragraph in Vietnamese. At one point, I think I read an article about road construction, I'm not sure. And y'all, trust me, it was rough. I barely knew how to pronounce any of the words, and since Vietnamese is a tonal language, my pronunciations, or should I say rather lack thereof, might have led to more misunderstandings than I had intended. Through my personal journey of language learning, I had learned a bit about my family history that I thought would be interesting to share with you guys. I was born by 2 refugees of Vietnam War. My mom had to drop out of school when she was in the 6th grade because her family could not afford to send her to school. My dad had to drop out of school when he was in 9th grade to work odd jobs to support our family. My parents worked so hard, and we happened to accumulate some wealth, that I had a pretty comfortable life. But my parents decided to travel almost 10,000 miles away from home, leaving their comfortable lives behind to give us a better life, my brother and I. Learning my language for me did not mean I could understand my mom when she was nagging me about my chores. Learning to communicate with my mom was the difference between me believing my life was something to take advantage of and knowing my life is something my family risked their financial security to give to me. I knew I needed to make my parents proud. Children of immigrants in America have this tough decision to make every single day. Do I want to express myself and risk getting casted out of my social circle? Or do I just want to fit in with everybody else and just act like everybody else? I hear children of immigrants say they wish they could have learned their parents' tongue. Consequently, I hear immigrant parents speak to their children in their broken and heavily accented English while their children make no effort to understand them whatsoever. If you've always wanted to understand more about your family history or where you came from, try learning your parents' language. Many children of immigrants will grow up assimilating to the American culture. Many of them will grow up, get jobs, and will still not know how to communicate with their parents. Don't be just a statistic. I find it difficult to believe how much I've changed since then. I used to shy away from questions about where I'm from, and I used to be so embarrassed to speak my language in front of everybody else, but now I enjoy speaking to my parents in it. I even talk about my stepdad, but don't tell him I said that. I understand the sacrifices that my parents have given me today have given me the opportunity to stand in front of you guys and speak to you. I'm not sure who I'd be if I didn't move here. Would I have grown an interest in foreign language? Would I have had the same cultural acceptance struggles as I had if I was surrounded by those who were more like me? My life has changed in such a positive way since I was able to find something that interested me. I went on to study French in high school, and I'm even part of the French Honor Society, or, let me be a nerd for a second, Société d'Honneur Française. Sorry, I just need to say that. Capitaine would be so proud of me right now. My future goal is to become a cinematographer and translate my films into languages that my friends, family, and the world can understand. I went through a period of rejecting my culture for the sole purpose of wanting others' approval. But I realize now who I am and what I'm meant to be. So, I'm gonna introduce myself again. Hi, my name is Cindy, and now that I know where I came from, I finally know where I'm going to be. Thank you.
Now, this duo is from the former Eastern Bloc. Alexander is from Bulgaria and Jasser is from Egypt. And today they'll be discussing modernity's obsession with materialism.
I'm Jackson.
And I'm Alexander.
And we're here to talk about
Romanticism.
So, please excuse our silly little outfits here. They will have their use later on. So, our story begins 220 years ago, when the French Enlightenment and the Scientific Revolution began an unprecedented push for social progress across Europe. a particular form of social progress that will enthrone itself as a sovereign monarch of natural law in the stead of theology and faith, with empirical data as its beautiful queen consort. You like that one? With this unchecked progress, we end up seeing later on, as history progresses, a variety of artistic movements, philosophies, and ideologies predicated purely on what is material and ignoring all that is spiritual, immaterial. The immaterial that contains within it faith, fate, and any purpose that is outside of furthering the terrestrial and moral condition.
What is also persecuted by this progress is what is deemed excessive. Any flair or uniqueness amongst the various people of this earth, anything that serves a purpose that distinguishes them simply as such, is to be done away with in the name of uniformity and equality. It is only when we strip away the love of life, the romanticism of life, we begin to see ourselves as mere beasts, insignificant, expendable, and without purpose.
Now, we have referenced to the term romanticism just now, and we were going to continue to do so throughout this little presentation. And we want to make a little clarification. When we say romanticism, we aren't referring to the deep bond between Yeezus and the Armenian queen, Kim Kardashian, but more so a literary movement that took around the early 1800s, focusing on art for art's sake, for furthering a culture and focusing on what is truly human, the human spirit, the human's emotion, and why humans do what they do.
We will also refer to utilitarianism throughout this talk. That is the idea that any object or action should only have those characteristics that allow it to perform the purpose for which it was meant. Now, those are definitely good characteristics for anything to have. After all, if you make something for one purpose, you want to at least for it to be able to perform that purpose. But the problem is that taking utilitarianism too far can cripple you so much that it prevents them from even performing the very tasks they were meant to perform. Now, this is an interesting theory, but how does it apply? Well, let's look at any modern city to get some context. What is a staple of civilization and of progress in any of the big cities of this world?
Clearly, in my opinion, an insulated dance floor that will allow me to resist these hot feet.
Good guess, but I'm afraid, big guy, that you are wrong. The correct answer is skyscrapers. Large towers of steel cages covered in glass panels that look exactly the same in Beijing, in Singapore, in London, in New York, in Paris, and in Moscow. Wherever you go, any culture, regardless of how far separated from each other, will have these identical looking high-rising buildings that just serve as not a purpose than what their designers basically want them to. There is nothing beautiful about them. There is nothing that signifies the culture of the people who build them in them. We're both from Eastern Bloc countries. We both come from cities covered in giant blocks of concrete and steel, and we've both seen the psychological effects of living compartments being utilized to house people. The human mind is naturally attracted to certain aesthetic elements. When deprived of such for prolonged periods of time, emotional and certain mental disorders are bound to occur, which greatly impacts the state of society. A similar occurrence can be noticed in the projects right here in America. Lower class housing compartment units created to serve only one purpose, and that is to house as many people as possible. One example of this project is the living compartment known as Pruitt Eagle, which was created to house the massive amounts of poor people, and it was essentially a giant building very similar to those found in Eastern Europe, made of concrete and with small glass windows, and it just didn't look good. And so the people that moved into those types of buildings, those aren't people looking for normal lifestyles, not just because they're poor, but just because that's not something any normal person would want to live in. And so usually those compartments are filled in with criminals and with a lot of drugs, and they're not very good places to create a family or to raise kids. And so they even fail at the very purpose that they were created for.
This is partly due to the inherent nature of utilitarianism. Utilitarianism, the style of which these buildings are built out of, these neighborhoods, if you would call them that, what they do is that they take the souls. It's not so much as the people going in there being bad, it's that the people that live in these conditions, it takes them down. It breaks down their humanity because it does not, the architecture, the surroundings do not exhibit their humanity. And this is an important clarification to make, an important thing to notice, is that with these utilitarian structures, we are sacrificing. We are sacrificing our cultural identity in order to achieve material gain, to cut corners. When you cut corners, you're cutting at the fabric of the human psyche.
Of course, if you scroll back a couple of 100 years ago, those cities I mentioned earlier, Moscow and Paris, will look very different. You can see many Ionic columns, Gothic spires raising, and really it wouldn't take much to put those in a building, to put that little extra. But it is not useful to the people, and it will also cost them money. So oftentimes it is shunned for the sake of modernity, basically.
So now we understand that utilitarianism is the antithesis of romanticism, and therefore it would damage the culture that romanticism is supposed to espouse. And when you affect this very delicate thing, culture is an incredibly delicate thing. It's the one thing that separates humans from other animals, the capacity to pass down patterns of thought and behavior from progenitor to offspring. This is what culture is, scientifically. When we take this away, this integral part of our being, when we sacrifice that, we're sacrificing our humanity, quite frankly. Culture includes a variety of things, including the very basics, such as how to eat and how to walk, to the more intricate aspects of our, as I said, as of our being, our etiquette, our faith, our language, and how we express our ideas.
Now, if you were to look in nature, you will see that some animals are very individualist. Bears are a good example of this. Bears will rarely be found in packs. They're known for living alone, very lonely lives. Humans are not bears, they're humans. We thrive on social interaction, and the way that the human social spirit is often expressed is through culture. With culture, we find our collective. That is essential to our survival. When our culture is threatened by these modernist views, the collective is threatened. And since we're all part of the collective, when the collective is threatened, I'm threatened, he's threatened, and you are all threatened.
This is the important thing to understand. We, in psychology, often Maslow's hierarchy of needs is one of the central pillars of understanding why the human individual seeks out interaction. You have on the first level, you have the basic survival needs. You have that's air, that's water, that's food, that's shelter. The second level, right above it, before you're able to self-actualize, before you're able to realize your full potential, that is the sense of belonging. That is safety. And with culture, we are given that collective. We are given the ability to find ourselves in the family, in the nation, in the neighborhood even. A sense of belonging. And that is what allows a person to achieve and self-actualize, the goal of every individual. How could we achieve self-actualization?
Can we achieve this?
In the modern world? It's very simple, thankfully. Thankfully, we could still save our culture. If you do not sacrifice your pursuit or love for the arts because it won't get you money, because it will give you something much more valuable than dollar bills and Benjamins or Washingtons. It will allow you to be at peace with yourself. And if you yourself do not find yourself to be one who is lover of the arts, then support those who are. allow them to self-actualize in their artistic fields. And that is it.
That is it.
Mr. Ford and Mr. Ortiz Medina are excited to be here tonight in support of the Enlight Conference. And Mr. Ford has invited Mr. Ortiz Medina to share his story here tonight.
Good evening, everyone. This is Carlos Ortiz Medina, excuse me. Carlos and I were sitting at lunch at Brookwood a month or so ago, and he and I were just having lunch together. And we just started talking about his move to America and his experiences here and his move to Georgia. And it was something that I thought that young folks like you really need to hear. And so I asked him to come tonight, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for the invitation.
And I've just got 4 questions, and we're going to go ahead and get started. And Carlos, tell me a little bit about your childhood in the Dominican Republic.
Okay. I grew up in a family of 6 members. My 3 sisters, my father, my mother, and myself. My father was an electrician, and my mother was a teacher. My father used to work as an electrician in the Dominican Republic, and he dropped out of school when he was in 3rd grade. So my father only knew 2 words: work and study. As a child, I had to do a lot of chores in the house. I remember I had to rake our yard that was half this auditorium after eating lunch. I had to make my bed. I have to polish all the shoes of the family. So on Saturday, that was my job from 3 to 6 in the afternoon. Instead of going out, I had to do work at home. When the school was on vacation, I had to work again. He woke me up at 8 o'clock in the morning, get ready. I said, Daddy, we are on vacation. I don't have to study. You're in charge of the house. And to make sure that I was at home, he used to call at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. I want to talk to Carlos. So they have to look for me wherever I was, and yes, Dad, here I am. Is everything okay? Yes, everything is okay. He wanted to make sure I was in the house. I had to do all the errands. I have to go to the store. My sister couldn't go to the store because he said, no, the grocer is going to try to conquer them. So you're the one who has to do all that work.
Thank you. When did you move to the United States, and where did you live before moving to Georgia in 2014?
I was able to come to the United States in 1988. I met a U.S. citizen in my country, and we moved to Puerto Rico. And then from Puerto Rico, I moved to New York in 1989, where I started working as a teacher. I used to teach private English classes in my country. So I said this is an opportunity to teach adults here in New York. And because of that experience, I was able to get a job in the school I was working for 25 years. And also, because of the hard work I had to do in my house, I only missed 5 days out of 25 years. My coworkers used to ask me for my time off. Please give me some of your sick hours. Give me some of your personal hours. I'm sorry, I cannot transfer them. Why don't you take some days off? I don't need them. And the priest and myself, we had all the hours, 350 hours a year. So he was asking the person in the accounting office to deduct some of my hours. So when I get the results, I was down. So he was winning, and I used to go and fight again. Hey, listen, I didn't miss a day here. So there was always a challenge between us.
Thank you. What motivates you to work in the schools?
Well, I always ask God, put me in a place where I can help a lot of people. Those who has been in the classroom where I work at Brookwood know that I cannot be sitting. I have to be moving. I have to be helping others. I feel a great desire of helping students, helping others achieve their goals.
Thank you. I believe you spent some time volunteering in the prisons in New York. Is that correct?
Yes, I was a volunteer for almost 15 years in 2 maximum security jails. And I motivated my students to obey the law, to be good students, to take advantage of time, don't waste your time, choose your friends. And to my surprise, one day I go to work in that prison and I found out one of my students is there. She came and started crying. I'm sorry, Mr. Ortiz, I'm sorry. I said, why? You haven't done anything to me. I didn't listen to what you said. All the stories you were telling in our classroom, I thought they were not true. But now I know it is true because I am here serving 20 years. So sad.
And I believe you were working there to help folks obtain their high school diploma and other areas as well?
Yes. I was teaching a lot of teenagers who drop out from high school. I was helping them get their GED diploma. And some of them have the bracelet, so they were incarcerated. And I was always talking to them, encourage them. But one of the stories that really touched me was when this girl comes and tells me, oh, Mr. Ortiz, I've been in jail for 10 years. I moved back and I said, what did you do? And she said, I spent 10 years in my house eating and watching TV. I said, I understand. That could be a prison with TV and a fridge. So she started coming to my classes, and I only helped her in 3 areas. She got her GED. She stopped being a welfare recipient, and she went to Italy to visit her mother. And all that in 1 year.
Awesome, thank you. And this is the big one. This is what got me in our conversation when we were having at lunch at Brookwood. What does it mean to you to now live in the United States?
Well, when I go back and I look when I was a kid, I was telling Mr. Ford, I had a little motorcycle. And I used to put my 2 feet on the handle of the motorcycle because I didn't want my pants to get all the rain and mud. And when I came to this country and I see all this opportunity, I say, my God, this is the land of opportunity. If you work hard and you have no vices, you can achieve your goal. So in the school I was working from 9 in the morning to 8 p.m. And Saturdays from 9 in the morning to 1 p.m. So my wife only saw me on Sundays and half of the afternoon on Saturdays. And I was saving my money, trying to one day, oh my God, I need to buy a car one day. I remember when I was in my country, I said, when will I buy a car? They are so expensive, and I am teaching private English classes, making little money. How will I buy a car? So when I came to America, now that I moved to Georgia, I bought my home with my wife, and we have 4 cars. Now she has a car, I have a car, our stepson have a car, and I have 2 cars now. So I was telling Mr. Ford that I also bought a motorcycle. My wife said, you're 56-year-old, why do you want a motorcycle? To remember when I was in that state of living, so poor, I didn't have anything, my friend. That's why I love this country, this land of opportunity. I see children here in America wasting their time. I go around and say, hey, you need to study, stop wasting your time. I go back to Dominican Republic, and people tell me all the time, why don't you marry me and take me to America? I say, I am already married. They tell me, we paid you $20,000. We make the wedding. We paid you the trip, round trip. I said, no, I can't, I'm sorry. And when I see kids here in this country wasting their time on the phone all the time, I am surprised. They're wasting their time. I have to talk to them. I stand up and go and say, hey, leave that phone, study. This is a great opportunity. And I am so proud of being part of Brookwood. Such an excellent group, excellent teachers, a good team. We want to help you. but you need to do your part. Those that have been with me, they know when I leave on Friday, I say, have a good weekend, but don't forget to study. So I feel that America gave me the opportunity to have a home, to have a car, and I have 3 American flags in my house because I feel I love this country. I would fight for this country. People don't know what it is to live in other countries. In Dominican Republic, I was in a very good school. But you know why? Because I got a scholarship. I didn't have to pay. I couldn't afford that school. When my parents divorced, my father was so angry that he said, I'm not going to support these kids. So my mother went to the school and said, hey, I don't want to take my kids out of this school. And they gave me a scholarship. They provided everything, books, everything. Even my ring was given for the school. I was telling Mr. Ford that to pay back, I used to go to the library every afternoon at 3 o'clock. I have to walk, so you can have an idea. I have to walk from Brookwood to Sugarloaf every day, back and forth, to go to the library to help other students. And I learned English because my father, every time we were on vacation, he said, you need to learn something new. So I was one vacation, I was studying English. Another vacation, I was studying French. Another vacation, I had to go to karate classes. I have to go to swimming classes. I had to be improving all the time. And I see kids here, you don't know how to swim? No, I don't know how to swim. Oh my God, all these beautiful pools here and you don't know how to swim. Then, my friends, I tell people, in this country, if you work hard, you can achieve your goal. I have 2 daughters. One is 28, the other one is 22, and the oldest one has a master's degree. And now that she bought her house and she bought her car, one day I go to her house and say, hey, give me the keys. She said, no, these are my keys. I said, you remember when I was telling you to study to get your high school diploma? You remember when I was calling you and telling you to study on Sundays? Look now, you bought a home before me. She bought the house before I could buy a house. She had a brand new car. And all she said was, Daddy, I know you didn't want me to suffer. We parents do not want our kids to suffer. I was telling my daughter, I don't want you to depend on a man. Oh, I have to be with him. He paid the bills. No. Get an education. I tell boys, hey, you need to be an example for this woman. You have to help your mother. You have to help your family. Also, my mother used to tell me, Carlos, I want you to get a college degree before I die. I was living with my mother, my 3 sisters, in a rented house. And as Q was saying, you don't know when that light is going off. And that happened to my mother. She came for some exams here in the United States, and she had a heart attack and she passed away. We had to wait 1 week for the body to arrive in Dominican Republic. I remember my mother on Thanksgiving because her body was as frozen as a turkey. And I didn't finish my college. I had now to take care of my 3 sisters. I was the second one. Now I have to support them. I had to start working to help my 3 sisters. And my education in the background. Then I have my family. Then now I have to support my family. So again, my school is behind. So don't wait for that moment. Don't wait for the moment that your mother, your father is going to leave. Take advantage of that opportunity. Get an education. My daughter used to tell me, Daddy, I want to be 18. And I used to tell her, I want to be 12. I don't want to pay bills. I want my mother to pay my bills. And if someone tells you, move out of your house, tell them they are crazy. Don't leave your parents' house until you have your master's degree. Tell them, I'm going to move in the basement. I'll help you with the rent.
Let's give it up for Carlos Ortiz Medina.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carlos.
Thank you very much.
So next up is Lydia Melka, who is a sophomore at Brookwood High School. And her parents are from Ethiopia, but she was born here in the United States. And she plays varsity lacrosse and is highly involved in the Brookwood community. And she's very proud to be a Bronco and is excited to speak in front of everyone here tonight.
Summer, a 2-month-long stretch where there's opportunity to do everything, but absolutely no obligation to do anything. Or if you have Ivy League dreams, a time to take online classes against your teacher's remarks to squeeze in just one more AP next year. Either way, it's a time every slaving student yearns for, and I'm assuming every parent dreads. My summers, specifically my Wednesdays, have gone like this for the past few summers. It starts with an early morning, and by early I mean 10 o'clock, as it does for most kids during the summer. I would be in that weird time where you're like half awake and half asleep, and then my heart would start beating like really fast, and I would just try to figure out why I was so excited. And then it would click. Generation Salon. A program where 200 kids pack into an oven-hot bus with all the windows down. A program that when we come out of that bus, we're armed with an arsenal of hula hoops and bubbles. A program that I had the privilege of interning for this summer. I would roll out of bed, half awake, but really excited because I knew what the day would hold. After brushing away my morning breath and eating a horribly unbalanced breakfast, I would literally do anything to make time pass until noon. I would play all the instruments in my house, which in my house is a lot. Watch a show, watch another show, fall back asleep. Again, no obligation to do anything. And I would just watch the clock waiting for time to go by. And then eventually it would be noon, and I would make a beeline towards my closet because dressing up for a Generation Salam is a whole thing. In order to respect the cultures that we come across in our endeavors, we have to dress generally conservatively. All skirts and pants have to be past the knees, no shoulders showing, just very modest. So after I would be dressed up and ready for the day, I would pack up my book bag, just get my Bible, my journal, my pens, little hand paints, bubbles. And once my friend's blue Jeep would pull into the driveway, my Wednesday afternoon adventure would begin. In order to understand what Gen Salam is, you have to understand where, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. In order to understand what Gen Salam is, you have to understand where it's held. Clarkston, Georgia, the single most diverse square mile in the whole entire United States. Every single second, hundreds of faces, cultures, pasts, everything just converge. The whole world in one place. The whole world in one place, 20 minutes from where we're standing right now. It's truly extraordinary. After picking up the other interns who were in our carpool group and going to QT for slushies, which slowly became a tradition as the summer would go on, we would arrive at the church at 1 o'clock, actually this church. If you noticed when you were driving in, there's a big parking lot across the street, and there's a little house in the corner, and we call that the D house. And so we would go into the basement of the D house, and as far as you could see, everything that a child would want to play with, just balls, hula hoops, bubbles, literally anything. It's just as far as I can see everywhere. And if you open a closet, it's just like a wall of gummies, goldfish, and I'm not gonna lie, I snuck a couple of those into my backpack a couple times. But just toys, just literally anything that you could think of that a kid would want. The intern's responsibility would to be divvy up like all of these supplies for what we would need for the evening at each of the sites, or where we would go in Clarkston, the different apartment complexes. We would put them in different bags, and then we would go to the buses that are parked on the other side of the parking lot, and everyone would walk over. Or in my case, I would run over, because without fail, every week I would kick off my shoes while we were packing the bags. For some reason, I would just never learn my lesson, and I would walk out on the pavement, be reminded that it's June in Georgia, and you can fry an egg on the sidewalk, and have to tiptoe run across the parking lot. So after that, we would have a short time of worship and dinner together, and then we would all pack into 3 buses in a van and head down to Clarkston, and each vehicle would have a different apartment complex assigned. There's a specific apartment complex that I've been going to ever since I was like early middle school called townhomes. 2 summers ago, because of complications with the directors of the apartment complex, we could no longer go to townhomes, and I was devastated. All through the school year after that, I would pester, like every Sunday morning, like asking the heads of Gen Salon, can we go back, can we go back, can we go back to townhomes? Just trying to find if there was any way that we could make it there. And then after a year of persistence, we finally got to go back to townhomes this past summer, and that was the site that I got to intern for, which was such a privilege. There were pretty much 2 types of reactions that we got when we came back to townhomes. The kids that had seen us before started jumping and like laughing, and were super excited, and they're like, they're here, the white people are here. And the kids who hadn't seen us before would just watch. We had a big like bright green bus, and they would just watch us like go across the circle of their apartment complex until we would park and come out. So when we arrived, the first job of interns, we would take a group of 2 or 3, and we would knock on the doors of the apartment complex to ask if we would have the privilege of getting to just hang out with the kids who lived there and play with all the things that we had brought. And I had a bunch of very interesting experiences knocking on the doors. One time we knocked on the door, this was one of my favorites, was when we knocked and we could hear people moving, but no one would answer the door. Finally they answered, and there was this huge family in this one apartment. And this man was like, hello, what's up? He didn't say what's up, but you get the idea. And we asked them, we told them what was going on, and he was so happy, and he just blessed us, and he told us that what we were doing was amazing. And that was just something that will always stick with me. And his young children came out to play with us, and sometimes all we would get are 2 little eyes going through the mail hole as they checked to see who was there. And one time, so as Sabina said, I'm Ethiopian, both of my parents grew up there. I mean, I was born in Melbourne, but I was still just immersed in the culture since I was young, just the food, the dialect, all of it. So when I walk up to an Ethiopian person's house, I just know there's a smell, I don't know. So when I walked up to the door, I was like, she's Ethiopian, I just know. And so I was like, okay, this is gonna be really exciting. Like I get to meet someone here who's like from the same place that my parents are from. Like I'm eternally indebted to like this place that gave me my 2 favorite people on earth. So I knock on the door, and she starts talking to me in Amharic, which is the main language that's spoken in Ethiopia. And while I can understand this language, I can't speak it fluently, but I can speak enough to say I can't speak it fluently. She was talking to me, and I was like replying in bits and pieces, and then I told her like I can't speak Amharic fluently. And right then and there, in front of 2 other interns, she proceeded to chastise me for 20 minutes about how I should know how to speak Amharic. And I was like, even in this moment of getting roasted by this Ethiopian lady that I don't really know, I'm just so glad to be here, so privileged to be here. And once we would have the kids come out, we would put all the supplies we'd put in those bags, the chalk, bubbles, everything, and we would just get to play with them for 2 hours. We would run around, just get to be goofy and draw stuff on the sidewalk. And we had this big bubble pool. We would just like dump these Dollar General giant like bubble containers into there, and they would have the big ones so they could run around. And sometimes all we would do is just pick them up, spin them around, and they would go again, and then my arms would be sore the next morning. But no matter what we did, I would walk away from that apartment complex with 2 kids on each hip, drenched in sweat, hair all over the place, with interpretive paintings of what a Clarkston kid thinks a flower is all up and down my arm. To someone passing by, I would probably look like a crazy woman, but I can confidently say there was not a moment that I walked away from that apartment complex, there was not a week, that I didn't have this just giant grin across my face. And this isn't because I felt like I was a do-gooder or like I was helping the world. It was because I was using my skills. I was serving. I was using my heart to welcome in a group of people who may not even know how to utter out a word in English, let alone know anyone here. I was able to play with children, just be with them, connect with them, as they don't really care what anyone else thinks either. I was able to serve, and I found unexplainable joy in it. And every single person who lives and breathes has the capacity to serve. Every single person has a skill, whether definable or not, you do. Whether that means you hold the brain to crack the immunology behind curing cancer, or you can just wiggle your ears. We all have one. We all have something that equips us to serve. Just within Clarkston, we need cooks to serve. We need cooks to fuel these food clinics, to serve volunteers, to learn how to cook the foods of these cultures to connect in what I think is the most beautiful vessel, food. And we need kids. We need kids to just look eye to eye with these Clarkston kids and realize that their past could be worlds apart, but in that moment, they're just two kids playing soccer. And we need people who can wiggle their ears. For the two kids who are sitting in the corner of Gen Salon, whose stories may always go untold, but always weigh them down to get them to smile, maybe even laugh. Just within this square mile, I saw countless ways that everyone sitting here in front of me could serve. So if this is just within 1 square mile, think into the scopes of our lives. In our neighborhoods, our communities, our houses, our families. Every day, an uncountable amount of people sit trying to find purpose, trying to find some type of break in mundane routine. And what they don't realize is that they'll never find that until they look out. We all have something that equips us to be able to serve others, to help others. And this all is enlightened, brought to light when we say, no matter what others have said about this, what I bear is worth sharing. What I bear can be used to help others. When this realization is genuine and action follows, the joy is immeasurable, unexplainable. I'm speaking from experience. These moments with half of the bubble pool on my arm, a kid on my leg screaming about Lord knows what. These moments, these clicks, is something that everyone is able to achieve. Take initiative to look within. Look through the lens of believing that there's actually something extraordinary to find there. You'll be astonished at what you have to bring to the table. Thank you.
So next taking the stage is Juan Castro, who is a senior here at Brookwood High School from Colombia, and he plans on studying political science in college and eventually wants to become a politician. And he also works as a lifeguard and is currently fluent in 2 languages.
How's everybody doing tonight? Yeah, it's raining outside, so get ready to get drenched either in sweat because it's so stuffy outside, or to get drenched in rain because it's so rainy outside, because it's Georgia, right? So today I'm gonna be talking about something that affects millions of Americans each day, millions of Americans each year, and that's institutional racism. Ooh, yeah, I said the ugly R word. And this impacts everybody in this country, in this beautiful country, no matter of race, religion, sexual orientation, no matter of creed. This affects us all because of how people integrate into our economy. Millions of Americans are unable to integrate into our economy because they're stuck in these bad financial situations, which they're forced to stay in because they can't obtain a proper education. So we're gonna get started. When the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were passed in 1865, when the Civil War ended, and what these amendments did was that they allowed all males, regardless of race, as long as they were born in the United States, it allowed them the right to vote, and it allowed them citizenship in the United States. And so, especially in the South, but all across the United States, laws were passed and laws were implemented for these new citizens and these new citizens to not be able to vote and not be able to have fair representation in their local, state, and federal governments. And during the time, there were two popular civil rights leaders, Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. Booker T. Washington believed that first, Black Americans should focus on getting an education first and then being able to have a career and make money. While W.E.B. Du Bois thought that these African Americans and these Black Americans should focus on working first and making money and then having an education. And of course, W.E.B. Du Bois ended up being the more popular of the two amongst white Americans, for the main reason that if one studies and if one obtains an education, they're more likely to make more money and be able to provide an education for their children and just continue the cycle. Meanwhile, if you don't get a degree, you're gonna be stuck in a bad situation for a long time. And so this continues through segregation, through equal but separate, and just this load of phooey, until the 24th and 26th Amendments were passed, where it said the segregation unconstitutional. These Jim Crow laws, these grandfather clauses, which if your grandfather didn't vote, then neither could you, out of here. If the literacy test that nobody could pass, out of here. All these things that prevented these minorities and these Black Americans from voting and having fair representation, out of here, right? So now things are looking up, right? Yay, equality. And then the mass ghettoization and cheap drugs become available. And these cheap drugs run rampant across urban areas and low-income neighborhoods where minorities are where minorities mainly live. And these minorities are starting to rely on these drugs, and gang violence skyrockets. I don't know, there should be a chart, there you go. Homicide offending rates by race since in 1980 to 2008. 1980 and 1990, that's when we see things start getting real bad in these low-income neighborhoods. Meanwhile, the white homicide rates, it pretty much plateaus. The next graph, real quick. Incarceration rates. These people are going to jail faster than ever, and they're not able, dads, moms, grandfathers, grandmothers, they aren't able to provide income for their children. They aren't able to provide someone to rely on for these children. These children end up not knowing what to do, and these children end up being oppressed by a system that's been made to oppress them. And that's something that we need to fix. And you know, we have stories of people coming out of poverty and making it. And you know, as beautiful as it is, that isn't the case. It's very rare. For example, my family, they migrated here from Colombia in 2000 to escape the horrible war on drugs that was terrorizing my home country. Well, not my home country, but their home country. I was born here in the United States. And my uncle came to this country, 23 years old, not having a college degree, just working his butt off. My aunt, she came here around 30 years old. She did have a college degree. And my grandpa, he stayed in Colombia. We were pretty well off in Colombia, but he eventually lost his life because of the violence. And a lot of the money stopped coming in, so they had to work even harder. My uncle, who didn't have a college degree, worked as hard as he could, and he did really well for himself in the real estate market, and now he's doing really well in the real estate market. And you know, he made it. He's one of those success stories. Meanwhile, my aunt, who did have a college degree, who worked just as hard as him, if not harder, she struggled. She struggled tremendously and trying to make it through the day, trying to find the next meal. And that's something that is a problem, because these people that do have an education sometimes aren't even allowed to be able to go to the next day without being oppressed by the system that's been made to oppress them. That's where our problem herein lies. You know, you could be as lucky as you can be, but that isn't going to change anything. You could be the smartest person in the world, but that isn't going to change anything. If we don't start doing something, if we don't start funding our public schools, if we don't start doing something to help these people get out of poverty and help these people get a better education so they can give a better life to their children and their children's children, we're going to continue to stay in this cynical cycle of not going anywhere. Because I didn't have an education, so I have to stay in poverty, and because I'm staying in poverty, my children won't have an education because I have been in poverty, and because they don't have an education, they will continue to be in poverty. So we need to do something to change it. Thank you.
And last but not least, we have Sabina Mercado coming up, and she's a 17-year-old Puerto Rican senior. Excuse my voice. She is very active in clubs and societies, and she's excited to be graduating in May and will be attending UGA next year. And while attending UGA, she intends on studying with a pre-med intent, and her choice of medicine can be contributed to her life filled with medicine and doctors, and today she is here to share that life.
Yeah. Thank you. So, hi, I'm Sabina Mercado, and before I begin, I want you guys to think about something. I want you guys to think about what it means to be titanium. And I'll get back to that later on. And in addition, when I say my story, I don't want your pity. I want your understanding, because I'm here to share my personal story, and I want to be raw and tell you how my life has been. So many describe my life as a medical series of unfortunate events, but with a happy ending. And unlike how most stories are told, I want to begin with my happy ending. And my happy ending is that I'm here, alive, and healthy, and in a few months I'll be graduating. That's my happy ending for right now. Because at one point in my life, the probability of me dying was higher than the probability of me living. But we'll talk about that later. So as a 17-year-old, I've had 10 surgeries in my life. And so it started when I was born, because when I was born, I was supposed to be born deaf. But through some miracle or maybe luck, I was born with hearing. But it was extremely impaired. So it took 3 surgeries in my right ear, 1 on my left ear to actually fix my hearing. I still struggle, but that's okay because I was able to overcome that. But then I struggled with my speech because of it. But that's okay because I overcame that too. But those were just 4 surgeries. The 5th one were my tonsils. That was easy. The 6th one is actually kind of funny. That one happened in 4th grade. During open house, my appendix ruptured. My mom didn't believe me. She thought I had a stomach virus, so she waited hours. And when they took me to the hospital, they were like, ma'am, your daughter, it's not a stomach virus, her appendix has ruptured. She needs to have immediate surgery right now. So that's kind of funny, I guess. But I'm really here to talk about my last 4 surgeries because those are the ones that have really impacted me the most. And it started in 5th grade when you have your scoliosis check. They bend you over and see if you have a bump on your back or a big, large lump. And I had a massive one. So I was sent to a specialist. And in the specialist, I had an x-ray done. And what they found was not great. My spine was curved about 56 degrees. And to put that in perspective, if you have below 30 degrees, you can wear a brace to fix it. Mine was so high that they were worried that my spine would curve and hit my other organs. So I had to have surgery ASAP. So on September 19th, 2011, I had a spinal fusion. What that is they take 2 rods and a couple screws made out of titanium, and they lock your spine in place and straighten it out. It was pretty awful. I woke up in the hospital bed, but that's okay because I knew now it was time to recover. I woke up realizing, okay, so I'm gonna have to learn how to walk again. I'm gonna learn how to eat properly, and I was okay with that because it was time to recover. So I spent 5 days there, and everything was okay, everything was going great. And so then they sent me home. First day home was great. Got to sleep in my own bed, it was so nice. Second day, things kind of went bad. So when I woke up, I knew something was different, but I didn't know what. The problem was that all of a sudden I was in the most excruciating pain that I have never felt in my life before. And then all of a sudden I was vomiting, but it was just acid. And then I stopped being able to breathe. So my mom called 911 immediately, and when the paramedics came, the minute they saw me, they rushed me to Children's Hospital. And when I got there, they put me in a room, and all of a sudden, 10 different doctors were surrounding me. They had no idea what was happening, but they did know one thing: I was dying. They just didn't know why. So they did what they had to do. They shoved a breathing tube in my nose to help me breathe. They put a PICC line in, which is about a snake-like cord this big. They start here, and they shove it to your heart so that they can pump medicine to your heart. I had an art line in my artery. I had an IV, and my fever was about a 104, and eventually my body just couldn't handle it anymore, and I passed out. And when I woke up in intensive care unit, ICU, and the surgeon came in and he said, okay, so we don't know what's happening. And I said, wow, great news. And he said, so we're gonna have to get your fever down because we need to open you up again and see what's happening. So they did that. Spent a few days basically in a freezer trying to lower my temperature. And when they opened up my back, what they found wasn't pretty. I had an infection rushing through my blood. But they thought it was just surface area, so they put 2 vacuums and a couple sponges to suck out the infected blood, closed me up and said, okay, in a few days you should be good to go. And I said, okay, sweet. In those few days, my mom slept with me. She was with me the whole entire time. My dad and my brother would come at night because my dad worked, and my brother, he was actually a high school student here still. And so he'd be doing his homework, and he'd be like, Serena, can you help me with math? And I'd be like, Tim, I'm dying. But that was okay. But after a few days, they opened me up. This was the 3rd time. And, I had hope. But what they found was worse. The infection had spread. It had spread to the rods and the screws. And the surgeons soon realized that if it spread to my bones, I would be dead. At that moment, the probability of me dying was higher than the probability of me living. And I was only 11 years old. He closed me up and he said, Serena, so we kept the vacuums in, the sponges in, we just kind of turned it up higher. We're hoping it works. Those were some of the scariest days of my life because I was so afraid to just go to sleep. Because it's like you're awake, but then what if I go to sleep and that was the last time I was gonna be awake? I was just gonna die in my sleep. Or I didn't know what to do, so people would come in with hope and teddy bears and flowers and leave in tears. So upset. They weren't giving me hope. I didn't have any hope. I thought I was dying and I was terrified of death. But when they opened me up the 4th time, what they found was kind of miraculous. The infection was gone, completely, without a trace, which was kind of amazing. And that was the best and the worst day of my life. Because when the surgeon came back in after I woke up, he said, congrats, the infection is gone, but now it's time to recover. I said, okay, doc, I got this. And he said, well, you haven't heard what you have to do. So you're gonna go home, and you're gonna have to have medicine pumped to your heart 3 times a day for the next 2 to 3 weeks. Because we wanna make sure that there's still not an infection in your blood. Also, you can't go to school for another 2 months at least because you're gonna have back spasms, which is like electricity shooting through your back. Also, you can't pick up heavy things, so you're gonna have to be embarrassed and have to have a rolly book bag at school, and everyone's gonna trip over it. Also, you can't sit on hard chairs. It's gonna hurt your back, so always bring a pillow everywhere. And lastly, no one can hug you right now because you have 50 stitches on your back, and you're gonna have to get each one cut off in a week or 2, and you don't want anyone to, break one or cause another infection. I looked at him and I said, okay, it's time to recover. Let's do it. And I did. I did everything he said for the whole entire year. And it took me about a year to fully physically recover, which was amazing because he thought it was going to take a lot longer. But I didn't realize how long it was going to take me to mentally recover. It was a traumatic experience for me, and after that, I hated my story, I hated my scar, I hated who I was. I didn't want anyone to know the truth because I thought I was just another pity story, and I didn't like that. But the thing about recovery is that It's a process. You get better. And you hit these checkpoints. And my first checkpoint was in 8th grade. I bought my first bathing suit in years. I used to always wear t-shirts because I didn't want anyone to see my scar, and I bought one, and I went to the pool wearing it, thinking, yeah, I look good. I look good. Yeah, people can see my scar, but honestly, who cares? I don't even know anybody. But then I hit another checkpoint when I was an underclassman, really freshman or sophomore year. I bought my first open back shirt, and I wore it to school. And people asked me, yo, why do you have a scar on your back? And I would tell them the story, because it's my story and I should be proud of it. And then I hit another checkpoint, actually, this year. You see this jumper? I love it. I've had it in my closet for over a year, but I refuse to wear it because, you know, it's too dressy to wear to school, but it's perfect for like inductions. But at inductions, you turn around and you go get your certificate. And I didn't want anyone to see my scar. Well, this year for the NAHS meeting, I'm an officer not to go speak. I wore this, and I felt great in it. And even being here today, it's like I'm almost there. Saying my story to all of you familiar and unfamiliar faces, it's something I felt like I had to do, because it's like another checkpoint of recovery. But it's not like I'm ever gonna be able to forget about this, because you know, every morning when I wake up, it's kind of hard to forget, because every time I wake up, I can't feel the bed I'm laying on. Problem was that since I was opened up so many times, I lost all the nerve tissue in my back. So my back is completely numb. But you know what? I'll take that over death, so I'm fine with it. But what I'm trying to show is that I'm strong. But not only am I strong, I am titanium. But what does that even mean? I believe that anyone can be strong. Anyone faces a challenge, overcomes a problem, but that doesn't make you titanium, because are you strong enough that almost nothing can break you? Almost nothing has the capability of breaking you. And I say almost because we're human. We're gonna break sometimes, we're gonna fall, and that's okay. But are you strong enough that almost nothing can? Because I am. I've hit my low, so I know where I am. And the thing is my past is my past. My past does not define who I am, but it contributes to who I am. And it shows that I'm strong, but not only am I strong, I'm titanium. But now, it's your turn. You really need to do a self-analysis, because anyone can be strong, but not everyone can be titanium. Thank you.
Can we just have one more round of applause for all our speakers here today? I just want to thank each and every one of you for coming out tonight, and I really hope you all enjoyed the event that we held here today, and I hope it will continue on in the future and grow and prosper. And once again, thank you all for coming out.